Hello, can you hear me okay? Hi, check services. This is us. And then it-
Wait a second.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Jim.
Do.
You more on here, so.
Good morning, Jim.
Good morning, Jim.
And Donna.
Yes, I'm here.
Early Monday morning.
It's too early.
Sorry. We changed the 8:30 time because on Wednesdays, the commissioners meeting is too close to this.
Right,
Yeah.
Well, Monday is a bad day for me, but Wednesday is a lot better.
Yeah, this is because we wouldn't have a quorum for the November meeting.
It's my fault.
No.
No, it wasn't just you, it was others as well.
Yeah.
And if you were to push it later in November,
Yeah,
there's, the whole week where we have holidays and people traveling, so having it the week before, we could still maintain some type of, momentum with this discussion, so thank you for being here, Jim.
I'm trying to figure out how to get rid of the Zoom picture. This is my wife's television or computer. Because I don't have any sound. Zoom.
that's a good backdrop.
Yes, Jim, you look very educated with all the books in the background.
Oh, he's concentrating.
Right.
Well, I have the ordinance pulled up and I also pulled up the current 751 and there was any questions of the talking things.
I had the edited one, so I forget which one I printed.
You might have a version with one. I just turned off. the-
Ginger, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Sorry for my tardiness.
It's okay, we're still waiting on.
Yeah, right on time.
Hi,
Hey,
how are you?
good.
Good. Good to see everyone on a Monday.
Yeah, we're all having a slight case.
Yeah. Wait, where am I?
Making it work. This is in place of our November meeting, where November is just a tricky month with holidays and. While we have at least 4 of you present,
5.
okay.
Sean, yeah. Good morning.
Good morning.
Do you think it would be feasible to hold our December meeting? Just.
In general?
Oh, yeah, it's the beginning of the month. Right?
Yeah, it'd be December 7th.
Oh, yeah.
I'll check my brain.
Yeah, my brain. I thought the same thing.
Yeah. We'll have access to this.
I actually do have a conflict on the 7th, but I'm not sure it'll be on the actual 7th. I have something marked off for hold for that whole week.
Okay,
So I may be a maybe.
okay.
Okay, I'm available. I have no conflicts.
I have 2, see?
Oh.
It's on the agenda.
Okay.
But I have 2, I have to get rid of the 9 o'clock one.
Okay,
It
yep.
supersedes, yeah.
And I need to get better about sending you a calendar invite. I know John's been asking me.
I copy and paste. I just call the meeting to order and here. And it was. However you want to put this up. Yes, I guess we're all available for our, with Ginger being a maybe on the 7th.
Yeah.
So, and that's at 8:30 also, correct? Right. Okay.
Correct, yeah.
Okay. Yes. I think that's great. Approval of the minutes and going way back to June 6th. And so anyway, I didn't have any corrections or anything. Anybody else have revisions to those?
I didn't, and I finally got a chance to review it because we tried to approve these at our last meeting.
Very good. Jim, any comments from you at all? On the minutes?
Oh, no, we may have lost Jim. We may have pushed the wrong button.
We lost Jim.
Oh, is he back as an attendee?
Oh, yeah.
Well, and gone.
Oh, no. Yeah.
Okay. Jim, it looks like you're now, I've learned a new term, panelist. So that means you can participate. And it looks like you're muted.
Okay,
There you go.
okay.
Very good.
He's
I thought I
back.
changed my name. But I-
Oh, no worries. Anyway, we're discussing the June minutes, and we're wondering if you had any corrections or changes or.
no, I wasn't there, so I can't vote on this thing. I
Oh,
wasn't there at the June meeting.
okay, so that's right. You were absent, yes.
Well, I'll move to approve our,
What's which one? So just 3 members, since I'm non-voting.
2, 3. We're just missing. Yeah, 3 out of 5.
Is that okay?
Okay,
okay, well, I'll move.
motion to approve our,
June 6th,
I'll
yeah.
second.
okay, all in favor?
Aye.
And Tim, an aye for you? Oh, that's right, we're not accusing you, aye for
Yeah.
me.
Not voting.
So it passes.
Donna did finish the October 5th minutes last week, but I thought we had enough with the June minutes in the large packet, so we will approve of that the next meeting.
Okay, great, I was
Thank you,
wondering.
Donna, for finishing.
I was searching them for them with the plus and
Sorry.
that's okay.
All righty, so we'll move those minutes to the next meeting. And yeah, I was looking for them, but they weren't there, so that's fine. All right, public input for items not on the agenda.
We don't have any other members of the public present.
Okay. Okay. Guess we'll move on to number 4, then old business, drainage easement, waiver request.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So this is the petition that we discussed at our last meeting, on October 5th. So this is a request for a drainage easement waiver. They came to us first for a building permit for a pole barn in their backyard. It's in a platted subdivision, Cars Farm subdivision from late 90s, early 2000s. And, so after speaking with planning on this, after our discussion last week, we requested a certified plot plan from them because it is so close within or very close to a drainage easement. Hopefully the certified plot plan will help them verify the location of this. And they will either need to remove the drainage easement, because right now the drainage easement is considered buildable area, or get a buildable area variance, which would of course require drainage board approval. So that's where it stands right now. No vote. We're gonna wait for them to respond to our last communication to them. But it's not gonna be an easy process by any means for a drainage easement waiver on this. The drainage easement is meant for retention pond. That was then, it's not functional. It was previous homeowner of their neighbor, and they don't live there anymore. They had filled in part of it. The outlet structure, I saw 2 pipes in the ground, but they weren't even covered over. It was just not functional. So, that's gonna be something that we need to think on for a little bit. It is enforceable under our post-construction ordinance, obviously. The county could technically go in there and rebuild a pond. And the homeowners need to understand that, so.
Yeah, I didn't realize that it had been filled in by a previous owner. I must have missed that in the last conversation, so
Yeah, the
that
last,
kind of changes things too.
exactly,
Yeah.
it's just kind of all around a mess.
Yeah, yeah, sounds like it.
Yeah,
And they didn't say it was filled in, they more or less talked about some grading going on there.
yeah, yeah, he told me that the previous homeowner of his neighbor had raised their backyard. and looking at the original grading plans for that subdivision, you see that it's supposed to be a depression,
Hmm.
so.
Yeah, makes it complex, but yeah, I guess we'll wait and see what
Yeah,
what
yeah.
happens.
Once they have an accurate map.
mhm,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
All right, so I want to spend most of today talking about the stormwater management ordinance. Um, So, general impressions on the ordinance itself. We've been in this process for 4 years now,
Mhm.
2 of them with me. I've taken some time to get, used to my position and being here and getting settled in. But we are at the point now where we are halfway through our grace period with the state for updating our ordinances for compliance with the new general permits. And I think at the end of the year, beginning of next year, just feels like a good time to just get it done, start implementing our stormwater permit. So the ordinance itself is to me the most important part because it's not as easy to go back and change things. I want to make sure it's correct and adequate for us. The technical standards manual, we can edit at the drainage board level, doesn't require commissioner's approval. And so the more technical items, more detailed design standards, we can go back and change those if necessary. We receive some feedback, say, on implementation and things need to be adjusted, we can do that. But the ordinance itself will need to go to the commissioners for approval. So this is the item I want to really discuss today. I have. All right, so I have it pulled up on the screen here. Ordinance itself. I also have a copy of existing current 761, if you want to refer back to that, if you have any questions. How do we want to go about? Go through chapter by chapter.
Well, not that I know 761 by heart, but I think you sent a corrected or revised version, red line strikeout.
Yeah.
Are there parts in there you might like to dive into,
Yeah.
areas?
Yeah. I want to talk about like detention requirements
Okay.
and drainage easement language in there, as well as the parks chapter. We started the parks chapter discussion last time, had some really good discussion, but I think we can continue that part as well.
Okay, sure.
So general information is very straightforward. Much of it is taken over from our existing 761. Chapter 2 is the discharge chapter, and that one I feel very comfortable with. It's pretty straightforward. And I will say that I do have some revisions and some feedback I got from Adam and Erica and our staff that I need to incorporate still. So this, we will be editing some of this still. but-
I had a question on some of the exempt discharges
Yeah.
and connections, which is within chapter 2.
Mhm.
I guess I just wanted to make sure we were comfortable with all of those exemptions. It seemed that some of them may. I've seen, I'll just say I've seen some of these sorts of discharges
Yeah.
that can create a significant concentrated flow that in
Mhm.
essence would be more like a stormwater discharge.
Mhm.
Especially kind of the sub pump foundation drains.
Yeah.
Especially during, or shortly after rain events. Those
Yeah.
can get significant. I don't know how much. Seems like it might not be as big of a problem in this
Yeah.
geologic framework as it
Right.
was in other places I've been, but
Mhm.
I just didn't know if we've seen that as a big issue here or if we see it maybe coming with future development or
Yeah.
I just wanted to kind of briefly just go over some of these, just because they
Yeah.
did seem a little,
Uh-huh.
yeah.
I think having the word uncontaminated in here helps a bit. I have had compliance issues where people have gray water connections, there's some pump or other types of connection.
Oh.
So those are easy because it's been contaminated,
Yeah.
some
Sure.
pump discharge,
Yeah,
and you require them to remove the additional connections.
yeah, sure.
So
Right.
if you're concerned about that part of it, yeah, but
Well, it's more of just the volume that I could potentially see coming from some of these. I
Yeah.
mean, I know of people who have basements, whose basements have been saturated constantly, and so they're constantly discharging into a concentrated flow area, and
I guess I have issues, we've had some issues where some pump is discharging onto a road or a sidewalk.
Mhm,
And it's caused significant issue as far as pavement condition.
Mhm.
yeah.
If they don't actually have it connected, say, to the storm sewer inlet, and if it's just sheet flow
Yeah.
onto pavement, creates a, that, degrades the road, but also can be a safety issue with ice. So,
Yeah, sure. I don't, is that addressed somewhere? I mean, is that sort of
I've
thing?
had issues in the past. Chapter 755 is the highway department's ordinance, where I think might have a little bit, but it's not, we don't have anything good to address direct discharges onto pavement or into the right of way. So,
So-
Well, I've got a question on chapter 3,
yeah,
policy on stormwater quantity management.
yes,
I'll read this first paragraph. The storage and controlled release of all of the excess stormwater runoff, that is for each outlet, as well as compensation for loss of floodplain storage shall be required for all development and redevelopments as defined in Appendix A1, located within Monroe County. Now, anything in Monroe County, the city's in Monroe County too. Does this include the city?
Mm,
no, this is only within the county's MS4 jurisdiction. So,
Because I had a question, because cities within Monroe County, and that this thing says Monroe County.
yeah,
Is Monroe County defined?
Um,
I was gonna maybe suggest
it's added.
as we go through this, if we're able to maybe cite the page number.
sure.
The first one, as you can see, there's two of them. There's one that goes with the ordinance and then one that goes with the packet on each page. Just. It'd be helpful if we can, if not, no worries.
Yeah, this is page 20 on mine.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Page 20 of the packet, 15.
Yeah.
Right, and I don't know if it defines. Monroe County.
Is the city eliminated throughout this whole project or not?
They have their own ordinance
Yeah,
and regulations regarding detention. It is not as stringent as the counties.
We
I
have
have talked to
Dave, if you want to reference the question.
Dave Schilling, okay, Dave Schilling's present. I was like, I have talked to one of the utilities engineers about this. But it may come down to the drainage board addressing the utility service board if we have significant concerns and really want to see action. So,
Your voice doesn't come through clearly through your mask.
I'm sorry, my daughter has a cough.
Yeah.
I wanna make sure everyone's okay. I would say I have discussed making, the city's discharge requirements more stringent, but, just at the staff level. I think if we want to see changes made to how the city's designing their detention ponds and requiring detention. I think we need to address the utility service board to have them update their policies. But I can try, I can keep trying.
So you want Monroe County in there to kind of encompass everything, to kind of have that ability.
Not in our ordinance, no,
We
we
can't
don't
have
have jurisdiction over the city.
Right.
But I think in other, Jim, in other spots in this, the ordinance, I think you had it said unincorporated Monroe County.
Mhm.
So I think, that puts you outside the city. So maybe this is one of those places that should be.
That could be, yeah.
Yep,
But yes, a good point.
very good point.
Yeah.
So Dave, I have a question for you, if we can go back to our chapter 2 comment on illicit discharges.
Which is page 11, or I, 11 and 12.
pages 11 and 12. So we just had a discussion on sump pump discharges. Where. If it's contaminated water, say if they have a gray water connection to their sump pump and they discharge it onto the surface. That's a clear cut violation to me, which is fine. But we've also had issues where people discharge sump pumps onto the road or onto a sidewalk. And it's been difficult to enforce. So would that be under 755, under the highway ordinance? Or? You can think about this.
Yeah, I really don't know, I guess. Yeah, highway would probably want to address it.
If there's
Yeah.
right of way. I've asked people to bring it back 10 feet. But didn't have really much to stand on.
Yeah, it was, there was really 4 of them in there that I was considering unnatural concentrated flow, right?
Uh-huh.
There's 4 things that could create significant erosion, excess water to the drainage system. I mean,
Mhm.
just, and that would be the sump pumps, the pool discharge.
Yeah,
The pumping of groundwater and then, I think it was like firefighting discharges. Discharges from firefighting activities. All the other ones seem like they're not going to affect the amount of water or the drainage capacity. But those 4 seem like they could be significant, right? They could add significant volume to
mhm,
concentrated flow. And so
right,
and I'm not suggesting that we take those out of being exempt, but I just wonder if we shouldn't add some sort of clause that says something like, unless it affects the capacity of the
mhm,
system to convey water, or,
yeah,
I don't know, just so that we do have, if something gets uncontrollable,
yeah.
we do have some way of,
Some upper bounds.
yeah.
I think we've handled it with education before, say for private property owners, if you can discharge to sewer, that's preferable. If you can't, then you do things in a certain way.
Mhm.
But never actually spelled out in the ordinance, besides the pollutant part of it. You need to dechlorinate it and do the pH adjustment.
Well, and that, I actually thought about that because there's salt ponds, there's salt swimming pools now where they use salt water instead of chlorinated water as an alternative for, because some people just don't like chlorine. So do we really want them discharging salt water into the system either?
And that
you
might
know?
be more of like a building planning code.
Yeah, and I don't know
Yeah.
if we're covered in that either.
Right, if there's no sanitary sewer access, then maybe you should just not allow those, because there's no good way to discharge the water.
Really
But
get
that's-
people,
yeah.
that would, swimming pool, not allowing swimming pool, but yeah, it just seems
I
like
know.
it'd be
You'd have
nice to have.
neutralize it.
Yeah, neutralizing the salts or, yeah, that's.
Cause that's what,
really
when they
difficult.
do pump test headers, when they're testing fire suppression systems in buildings. And they run the pump test header, so it simulates it, then they neutralize the chlorinated water before, because they're dumping it out on the pavement.
Right,
But those are things, how can we control that sort of thing? Those are-
right.
And
Yeah,
maybe
I-
too late.
And
Yeah,
I
and
think-
Out there.
Again, it seems like it's not a matter of, we probably shouldn't be controlling those things should be allowed, but I could see there being a scenario where it actually causes a lot of undue harm to the system.
Mhm,
If done at the wrong time or
yeah,
in
Just
the
like
wrong
we
method, right?
regulate pumps on a construction site, if you have a direct hose discharge.
Yeah.
To a rear yard stream. which,
Yeah.
You know, swimming pools are near rear yard streams in some
Yeah.
cases, that's where they're gonna be discharging it. So something as just a. Just like a procedural best practice. Where you do it in a non-erosive manner. Just same thing with hydrant flushing, we should be, you know, watching for things like that as well.
Yeah, maybe non-erosive or does not contribute to excess flooding,
Yeah,
right? And I think I'd be
Something
happy
like
with,
that,
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I think that would
There's,
allow for the activities, but then,
In most I was thinking most basements, some pumps just. They don't pump a massive amount of water.
Yeah, well,
typically, unless-
I've seen some, but it's amazing. This one house I went to, they had an external perimeter drain to pull off and then an internal perimeter drain. And then a backup of that one, and all three pumps were constantly running. I mean, they must have been,
Oh, that sounds like they should not have had a basement or something.
yeah, well, that's a whole nother
Yeah.
issue. Yeah, agreed, yeah, but I've seen it, so,
Yeah.
I
um,
know some areas that have been built within the past 20 or so years where you have 3 sump pumps in the basement. And we approved that.
Yeah.
You know,
I think Discipline Highway, not a stormwater quality issue, but highway doesn't want that pumped out on the winter on the roads. or
Exactly.
sidewalks.
Right.
And my neighbor, when I was in town, they were on vacation and their water line froze and broke inside their
Oh.
house. And so their sump pump was kicking that out into the street. And it was like ice formations out there.
yeah,
So, good
Okay,
things
so,
to do.
yeah, some bizarre conditions.
yeah.
Or,
yeah,
So maybe that's something that I can talk with Ben and Lisa about,
yes.
if it needs to come from them, at least as far as road safety goes, but we can address, erosion and volume concerns. I honestly don't know, I haven't thought of any concerns I've had as far as volume goes around here. I don't know if anyone with discharges could, unless it was done a horrible time where everything is saturated and we already have high flood waters.
yeah,
No,
and that's, I
kind of
guess
when it
what
all-
Okay,
yeah, that's what I'm concerned about is that somebody picks just the
Yeah.
worst time possible to
Yeah.
discharge their pool water or
right.
something,
So that could be just down to education, say, don't do it when the water's already high. Um,
I do have a neighbor that has some pump and a backup. And when the entire valley is flooded, it's one of these places where you shouldn't have a basement.
Yeah, right.
And so you can't hardly tell his pumping because the entire valley is flooded.
Right, right.
But, yeah, they are
Uh-huh.
pumping a significant amount of water.
Yeah. Good. I'll say this list is about identical to the state's general permit requirements.
Okay.
So if you want to be more stringent or add any additional conditions, we can do that, but I'm probably not gonna actually change
The
these
actual list.
discharges, yeah.
No, I think with the term, no excessive flooding or erosion or whatever he's,
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think that'd be great.
okay. All right, so that was that first comment, then we went back to page 15. And discuss the storm quantity chapter, which I do want to spend another minute
Yeah.
on this.
yeah, absolutely.
Because this first sentence, as Jim pointed out, is very strong. We are requiring detention for any new development or redevelopment. But there's also a section on waivers, so, in this chapter,
Uh-huh.
so we can hone in on what we're actually requiring. So I added this comment for unincorporated Monroe County, that is what this ordinance covers. So I don't want there to be confusion on that. We will be regulating release rate requirements, downstream restrictions, acceptable outlet, and then joining property impacts. So information on compensatory floodplain storage, our planning department does have significant floodplain ordinance, and it covers compensatory storage. And again, any details are gonna be either in the planning department's ordinance or the technical standards manual for that. Before I get into waivers, any other questions or comments on the stormwater quantity chapter 3?
No.
So, I'm questioning just, it seems with the language here that we're gonna have a lot more drainage easements going forward. And, yeah. Which is it, right, which is a good thing
Yeah.
as far as I think we've considered just to ensure that there is accessible drainage ways. And you're comfortable with that and you're prepared to keep track of them and all that good stuff? Okay, yeah, I just want, that's the comment, I guess.
Yeah, as far as keeping track of them, a lot of it is here, just referencing plats. I know Tron's been working on digitizing plats that come in. His office has been doing that. It'd be a great goal to eventually have the drainage easements completely digitized. Be able to overlay that with, say, our asset management software and be able to see it all would be great. Right now, we do very minimal work within drainage easements anyway. We try and put it on the HOA for general maintenance or property owners. And of course, if there is a catastrophic failure, if, home public safety is in danger, it would give us the ability to go in and fix something if we need to. There's so much private infrastructure and private property that the county is not equipped to maintain all of it, so. I think that's language we need to clarify in here. If a drainage easement is dedicated on private property, who is responsible for what? Because a lot of HOAs have come to the county, assuming we're going to fix something in people's rear yards or whatever, people have fences up and barns and. Like, I'm not ready to do all that.
Right.
So.
Yeah.
So,
I just, one comment,
Yeah.
3-2, and just, could you kind of boil it down to like a practical example where it says approval by MS4 coordinator or the drainage board, so it kind of gives discretion to the
Okay.
MS4 coordinator,
Yeah.
the way I read that, and then potentially the drainage board can. Why did you like the or, either or, and I would assume that's because of some real examples, and if you could share them into, right?
Yeah. Sure, you put that in there, I'll say that. Some things, if I'm comfortable deciding something at the staff level, that means to. To me, if it's low risk, follows previous decisions the drainage board has made. Like, I would feel comfortable doing it at the staff level without having to have a board vote on it. We only meet monthly, sometimes not even monthly. It could substantially hold up a project if you have to wait 2 months for the drainage board to decide on something. If it's high risk, then of course we would wait until the drainage board can decide. But I don't know, something I did want to talk about as well is areas like Lake Monroe watershed, where you're discharging into a flood control reservoir. We have projects that will obviously require water quality treatment, as we normally would, but more stringent detention design for something that's just gonna go directly into flood control reservoir. How do we handle projects like that?
So my one concern is like, and it's, I've kind of said this a couple times, is having mechanisms in place that trigger certain things to come to the drainage board.
Yeah,
I mean, follow through, it says that are, consistent with the standards, policies and objectives of this ordinance. I think that's makes sense, but kind of creates kind of a, well, what's consistent for, look at all these petitions to kind of identify that this is consistent. Seems like a lot of work to flag something to come to the drainage board, so I'm wondering if it should be kind of just adding something in there like high risk, where it has the MS4 coordinator's ability to deal with it unless high risk and then needs to go to the drainage board. So I leave it amongst the drainage board members, but this could over time and 5 to 10 years, what's consistent, like what's going to flag something to come to the drainage board to be that is of high risk. And I'm not saying you won't bring it, that's just kind of
it should be spelled out.
where I'm at, is it seems like there's a lot of discretion in there.
Yeah, especially for the engineers who are having to design something and tell their clients what to expect. They need to know if it's gonna have to go to drainage board or not.
And it doesn't put our MS4 coordinator in the hot seat every time too, which, I think is something we should consider, because some of these projects costs have a lot of, financial costs associated with them, so. That's just kind of my comment on that.
Can I get clarity on if there was a project where it was something that easily could be approved by an MSO coordinator because it's pretty apparent what the situation is and that there's no real risk to it and all that. Would it be valuable to go ahead and just send that to the drainage board, or is this even possible? to Send it to the drainage board and say, I'm gonna approve this unless anybody has a problem with it. Right, and then that could be the triggering mechanism to say, well, that might be a drainage board.
Like a
Yeah.
consent agenda kind of thing, like if there's no one that,
Yeah, no one
As
raised,
in-
yeah, no one raised their head and said, well, I'd like to see this one more thoroughly or something, you know, what I mean, if somebody. Then we could kind of email electronically say,
well, that's the thing,
Yeah,
could we discuss that type of business without being in a meeting?
well, that's why I guess that was what the question really boiled down to, is that allowed?
I was just thinking. If you have a subdivision or a project,
Mm,
we're gonna have a set of regulations that you have to design.
Right,
Right,
So why would it, the MS4 could review it and make sure it satisfies those basic requirements. Why then would it have to come to the drainage?
I think it's if there, I think that's what it's saying though, is if there's a
It's
Unless-
high risk.
it says, they have to provide without. Direct release of runoff from a new development or redevelopment without providing detention is prohibited unless improved. And so it's those scenarios where they're asking for, but you're right, I think at that point, it almost has to come to the
Well, and I
drainage
have,
board, right?
how often would you not have detention? But I was thinking in the Lake Monroe, if the water is going to Lake Monroe. In some instances, I would think you'd want that water to get there first, so it's released out of the dam before the dam is controlling. So if you think of times of concentration. You may want that water to pass through rather than being held back and compounding what the dam is doing for flood control. Because that can happen when you have all these basins are holding back and detaining water for, say, 24 hours. And all this, everything else is rushing to the lake. And if that could have gotten into the lake and flown through or passed through. It would still. I don't know what I'm trying to say. You could reduce or maybe modify how the detention basins work that are right at the lake level. So if you're doing something, for instance, at the point or something like that, where it's going right into the lake. If you held it back 24 hours and there was some flood control setup, wouldn't you want that little bit of water to get through and not be compounding the flooding problem?
Seems like Army Corps has the master plan for these basins. and It seems
Yeah.
like they would probably have some language in there that would
Well-
state to that, so we could probably invite somebody from Army Corps
Yeah.
to help advise those sort of
Yeah.
scenarios.
Right, and it could be, how did they design the basin for flood control? Did they do it? Under the existing conditions that were done in whatever year six, I'm not sure what year Lake Monroe was actually established. Did they consider build out? For urban
Yeah,
development
that's a
within
good
the
question.
lakes watershed?
Yeah, I think getting them involved in the conversation would really be important.
This.
Yeah.
Well, it'd be good to understand how the lake was designed.
Yeah.
And what,
I think they redevelop those master plans pretty periodically, I think like every 10 years or something like that, so. I would assume that they would take into consideration current situation, but I don't know, because I
but then
don't,
they don't go change in an emergency spillway or.
Yeah.
Because it's,
I don't even think they've done like bathymetry mapping, so I don't know if they know their capacity even currently, so who knows, I don't know, that's a good question.
well, then a lot of it fluctuates, if you have a very dry summer, no rain, the lake's down.
Right,
To
Right.
some really low level, and you want lots of precipitation to come and bring that back up, and then all of a sudden it's not. Necessarily performing as a flood control because there's no runoff to control, but then you could have another year that's completely. Raining all the
super
time,
saturated situation, yeah.
and you're lowering and raising the flood gates.
So even if, say we have some type of detention, even if it's just, based on water quality volume. It really shouldn't be up to the individual developers in that watershed on how it affects. The water levels in the dam, that should be something that the Corps of Engineers should be considering. In their long-term planning for the lake, then. Like the individual homeowners can't control, oh, if the lake level is low, we're gonna, discharge this way, if it's too high, we're gonna hold it back more, like the property owners. Can't be deciding that.
No, and I would say that the core and the MS4, Monroe County MS4, the folks need to get on the same point of, do we not want to allow
Mhm.
hold back in these areas, or, I think that conversation is
Yeah.
probably a good conversation to have, and then we can then put in particular areas saying, you're in this zone, you don't put in the time, I mean, we
Right.
can
Yeah.
set that at that time, but until that conversation has, it seems like we would have to maintain status quo of what we're requiring for everyone else until they tell us, I mean, definitely have that conversation, but until they tell us otherwise.
Right. We do have Pear Creek as a critical drainage area. Because of, I think Terry did that for road flooding issues. The road goes basically, stream and the road are next to each other.
Yeah.
And Maggie Sullivan has asked me why we did that and gave my best guess as to why. We also have issues on Brevens Creek Road, obviously, but the development pressure is not the same. So maybe that's why. But anyways, when talking about Lake Monroe, it is in the Lake Monroe watershed, so.
Yeah, and there's a lot of movement maps in there currently.
So I will make this clearer.
Yeah, well, I thought wasn't there, regarding this ore there, wasn't there a description in the technical standards about? Yeah, it was some, like, depending on the complexity or whatever, I thought you had language about, if it was simpler, less complex, MS4. Coordinator can do it,
Yeah.
but if it was more complex, then it would brought to the drainage board.
Yeah,
And I think you've been giving us updates on all these things you've been approving, haven't you there?
I'm trying. Last minute I didn't get to it, but I have been trying to track the developments in the spreadsheet, so I can just give it to you and you can just go through and say, oh, okay, we've acquired so many plans and it's in this watershed, critical drainage area. If it's a permanent, with the CFGP or not. I will say, I haven't had a site plan come in since last spring that actually required an extensive review of, say, like, new detention ponds with storm sewer calculations and everything. Most of what's come in so far this summer, fall, has been either drained for a regional pond or just a, site plan amendment where there's already detention on site or something like that.
Right.
It's been kind of slow. summer.
And
That's good.
But yes, but also, Terry stopped doing reviews for us in the spring, and I was ready to transition over to Christopher Burke Engineering to do site plan reviews. And I'm telling Carrie at Christopher Burke, I'm like, well, like I haven't sent anything to you yet.
Because, right.
Yeah. But anyway, I do track these and I can make a point to maybe you can just send it separately. If you don't have a meeting, just send it monthly to say this is what I'm reviewing and
Yeah.
if you want to see any plans, ask me.
Yeah, I've appreciated you and Terry taking responsibility for the simpler ones.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
That's how, yeah.
I remember seeing some of the drainage board meetings from the 90s and 2000s where we were meeting several times a month to approve things. So, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, in my head, I'm seeing things like if all of these items where we have critical drainage area, downstream restrictions, inadequate outlets, those are things that I would see, that I would say, I want the drainage board to look at this. So maybe I can word this clearer to say, what would or would not require drainage board review, either here or in the technical standards manual. That would be easier for everyone.
Yes.
Sure.
Yeah.
Anything that gives a little bit of a predictability, I think, would be nice, but what maybe the drainage board sees, but also what the developer might incur through the project.
That's, which is great. Okay. Um, We talked about drainage easement requirements. We have a little bit more language than our current chapter 761. But
And a lot of that's because of the change in the rule, correct? No, okay,
sorry, what changed?
in this, in the, roof, not the robot, the,
Oh, the general.
Construction
permit.
will permit.
yeah,
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't
Okay.
think they required anything more stringent.
okay, I was the, easement with, or the, setbacks, and that sort of thing, but, never mind.
Okay.
Proceed.
Yeah, we're requiring drainage easements, yeah, conveyances that go through new subdivisions. I view those as if the adjacent parcels were to develop, do they have an adequate outlet? Could they convey water from their property to the nearest receiving water body and determine that connection? Anyway, any new development that has a detention pond or anything on their property, put it in a drainage easement. So that, we have access to inspect it, or instead of things fail, don't want to happen. Have a way to access it. Just general on construction sequencing, this goes into more detail in the construction and technical standards. But this is basically saying that you can have a detention pond to be used as a temporary basin during construction. And how to do all of that. Like we have some subdivisions where we are using a detention pond as temporary sediment basins. And people are moving into homes right next to them. And so I've been talking to Erica and our contractors to say, this pond needs to function as a detention pond if we have a very large rain event. I need it to be able to drain properly. So you need to have that outlet structure be able to drain and the emergency spillway functional and stabilized. Because it needs to function that way. And with small rain events, we still have a way to hold some of the water back and allow as much sediment to settle out as possible. But changing the way things were done previously, I think we're thinking about it that way.
One consideration too that you might want to think is the long term. If it's going to become from a temporary to a permanent,
Yeah,
that sediment, making sure that they remove the sediment buildup from during, so that it's not in there for the long term. 'Cause that's huge. If they don't dredge it out or they don't remove that, then that pond is never gonna work,
Never function.
never
Yeah.
function correctly.
right.
So
So
would that be covered by our as-built?
I'm sure that's in the.
It should, we don't really track the volume of amended soils out of the ponds. Where if you're not excavating, however far down you need to go, 18 inches or whatever, yeah, you're putting in the under drains, but then those amended soils, you need to dig out a large volume of sediment then to replace it with amended soils to meet the design. We need to be better about that. It's a balance between how much we want to micromanage the builders. We don't ask for low tickets or we don't perform infiltration tests, all of them. It would be a big change, hopefully. Anyway, we try our best to get out there and see the installation, see the underground installation and amend soils on site. And then requesting as-bills, make sure the elevations are all as close to design as possible. There are just some ways where it can be fudged a little bit.
Well, I'm almost thinking you would want to put the under drains in until
Right.
most of the development is.
Oh, yeah, we do not
intact
let
And you're
them.
not using this, because otherwise it's a wait.
Exactly, yeah, no under drainage should be in during construction, they have a temporary standpipe during construction. That's what I was saying, like, so with a temporary standpipe, you're holding back most rain events during construction. But it should still have a way to overflow
Exactly.
if it
Yeah.
does, if it's the overflow condition. Yeah. We do have more detailed guidance on this. We discuss all this in pre-construction meetings as well. Placement of utilities, so this is new. There's a term senior rights in there. Which when it comes to a drainage easement, flood control, to me, it makes sense. But I also am curious to know if we need to actually enforce this section at any time, how that would go.
What do you think? Are you thinking about fiber or natural gas or something going in at some
In a
later
drainage
date?
easement. Yeah,
Because
this fiber optics is a big animal right now.
yeah, well, a lot of it's directional drill. I guess it's having to go back in that easement to do maintenance. You had to repair a pipe and all of a sudden you've got a fiber line running adjacent to, is that a concern or?
yeah. I think my main issue I see is the not properly doing final grade if they do disturb it, not stabilizing it, and placement of the brush and debris in the easements.
Those are concerns, I've heard expressed by other county surveyors, but that's typically for their legal drains.
Mhm.
But they expressed a lot of concerns about the potential impacts of installing fiber optics. And just kind of the momentum it's taken on, so we're gonna see a lot more of that occur moving forward, so.
And so the fiber optics are in the easements?
Oh, yeah,
or
they
in-
were.
Yeah.
And I've seen a lot of instances where you have erosion within a drainage easement and the fibers exposed and the homeowners try and call and they don't get a response. That's just how it is.
I just noticed under waivers, non-major residential subdivisions. How do you define a non-major residential subdivision?
Yeah, so that we call it a minor subdivision versus a major subdivision. A major subdivision has 5 or more lots being created as part of the subdivision. A minor subdivision would be 4 or fewer lots being created, and so a minor subdivision, we will not require detention for those. Most times they don't require any new public improvements. It's just folks accessing their parcels either off of an existing road or existing private driveway. And so it's just the builder going in and building houses, not a developer actually installing any new infrastructure.
So a non-major residential subdivision is a minor subdivision. Is that
Yeah.
right?
Or an administrative, yeah.
Okay, so saying non-major covers minor
Right.
subdivisions, administrative subdivisions, okay.
Okay,
And is that definition in there?
It's in the zoning ordinance.
Oh,
There's separate-
sorry. Oh, okay.
So a non-major residential subdivision is not defined in this ordinance. Can I reference the planning and zoning ordinance in this? Okay.
I think in our county code, it basically says any term is specifically defined anywhere in the code applies throughout the code. So, I think we're covered on that, but this is such a sort of a standalone kind of an ordinance that it might be helpful,
And we're in the midst of updating
you
the
know.
county's development ordinance, so I would assume a lot of the terminology is gonna stay the same, but I mean, let's say they decide to get rid of major subdivision, then what's this referencing? So I think referencing the code would probably be good. But then we get in that problematic situation is when the code's updated and you're referencing an old. Then code, and then this has to be updated, then you have to go through that whole process.
I think this is something big enough where,
I would just make sure that, pretty,
Yeah.
you know, that we don't, planning doesn't have a naming convention
Yeah,
change.
I think
Yeah.
we have a provision in that says, items, incorporated items that are amended. The amendment will be incorporated as well, so.
okay.
Okay.
Good question.
Yeah, there's
thank
gotta
you.
be some mechanism where.
Yes, yes.
Okay. We still have the 4,000 square foot, threshold for new impervious surface.
Don't have an opinion one way or the other, so I don't know
Yeah.
if others do.
I don't see a reason to change that. I think I've run into some implementation questions. Where we have some site plans that have had multiple amendments, where you have 1,000 feet here, 2,000 feet here. At what point do I say, think we need some detention on this property for, but that would be for the like historical amendments. And I have to go back to previous drainage reports to see what the original detention pond, if there was one, what that actually was designed to capture. It gets complicated for me.
Yeah,
Um,
but yeah, I think this covers it, right? Is if it starts to get over 4,000, then
Mhm.
suddenly it triggers
right,
the requirement.
for. She says for developments. So say if we had a development that initially required detention and then years later they have, expansions. For some of them, it seems so small that it do anything, but, I want to make sure I'm doing this properly. So you say say we have multiple expansions and the expansions from the original design go beyond 4,000, then all of that new area, once they reach that threshold, should require detention. That's a clear boundary. Clear line.
Yes.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yes.
Yeah.
But do we need to add something in here that talks about a
Expansion.
maximum of overtime or? I don't know how to phrase it or phrase it. A cumulative,
I think it'd be a good idea. What
Well, that's
happens,
what's
what
less
happens,
than-
just what Kelsey described, and that should be set forth in there.
So it gets tricky because sometimes you have a development that designs a pond with expansions in mind. It becomes a regional pond and they say. We designed this so that all of this can be impervious. And that's good.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's not clear when I go back to drainage reports or other notes that that's happened and. It just requires a lot of research sometimes for some of the older ones where it's not clear.
Couldn't you put the burden on the developer though? I mean, couldn't you say, hey, can you
Yes.
determine what that pond is
Yeah.
able to?
Yeah.
What was it designed to? I mean.
Yeah.
Put it back on them.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Any other questions on this
Or
section?
have us put it back on them, yeah.
What?
I said, or have us put it back on them if you.
Yes.
Yep, yep. Yep.
I-
Um,
I like the utility thing, just so you know.
okay, okay,
We kind of skipped over it after, but it's good. And I didn't see any
Mhm.
issues with the waivers either. I didn't see
Mhm.
anything missing or.
yeah, about the utility thing, it's not gonna be fully implementable, obviously. But I hope, at least I know G is good about just applying with a SWIP and everything. Even if it could technically be exempt for a project, we at least can see what they're doing. They usually file for a SWIP and CSGP for all their large projects anyway.
I know, certain utilities like pipelines, they require certain distances from drainage, so
Mhm.
I don't know if the fiber optics
Mhm.
is considering that or not, but,
Yeah.
it's their destruction that they're gonna have to deal with, you know, we're putting something in that deals with drainage
Mhm.
and making sure it's still functional, but
Mhm.
if it destroys their fiber optics, that's on them, I mean, I just.
The amount of, the fiber, I think, is the biggest issue. We do have, gas lines and within ditches and
Yeah.
easements, but.
Right.
Fiber is the one where they will punch through an HDPE pipe, like it's no problem, and I think that's what we need to be able to enforce. So,
So that this,
Yeah,
these structures exist, you need
mhm.
to be careful of them.
And if we have senior roads, we will require you to fix it, replace it, or something if you damage a pipe.
I'm wondering if we should have a requirement of minimum separation.
Mhm.
If they're running parallel, just like water and sanitary sewer, you know,
Mhm.
you have a separation of 10 feet outside of pipe to outside, or it has to be 18 inches clear underneath.
Mhm. I
Yeah,
think-
I'm trying to think of what CBU requires. The whole thing is,
Mhm.
CBU typically has a water or a sewer easement, and they don't let anybody in their easement. And Duke Energy and Vectren have to stay out of it.
No.
So they're in their own utility easement,
Mhm.
10 feet away from protected water, sewer, and storm.
Right.
But that's usually piped.
Right.
You know, if it's in a swale or,
yeah, I think this kind of goes back to it's not. Having their fiber optic too close to drainage isn't. Unless during installation, they mess something up, but it's not gonna mess up the drainage too much as it will to mess up the fiber optics, so. The risk is really on them to put it, if they put it too close. then-
well, except that we have to come in and repair a pipe,
Right.
Sure,
and that's the worst thing to hit,
Mhm.
Yes.
communications. So you would want to have enough room
for
so that
I
you
see what you
could
mean.
take an
what
excavator
you
and
mean,
pull
yeah.
a pipe out and.
Yeah, could we put some distance, some separation distance? in
And for new construction. Yeah,
Yeah.
there should be a distance, you can't put the fiber
Right.
through the pipe.
Well, that's what I was trying to think.
Oh.
Let me check what.
But
CBU, I
even
think
crossing
it's-
it, yeah,
Yeah,
crossing it is,
Well, definitely, we don't
difficult.
want them going right to our pipe, and then you
Right.
don't know until. it's
but you
too
don't wanna
late.
go like right underneath either, or, you
Yeah,
know.
you want some clearance.
Some clearance, yeah.
the other thing to note is that we are a county MS4, we do not own a camera truck. I'd love to have one, one with the structure we have. CBU has 3 camera trucks, I think. Whether or not they fully use them is one thing, but if I were to need to televise a line, I'd have to contract it out.
Yeah.
So I don't do a regular monitoring of the pipes in the county, so. So that makes this more important in a way, make sure it's built properly, but I also don't have a way to check. So. Yeah, I also need to do a construction specifications manual. It's referenced in the technical standards manual, but we haven't actually created it yet.
Oh,
We have a lot in the existing 761. And that's what is going to be referenced until that manual is created. So in terms of implementation, how that's all going to work. And then correct me if I can't do that, but I'm pretty sure I can.
yeah, so this can go into that.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know that CBU and the county, the construction specifications were both mirrored on Indianapolis when they were first created. I know CBU has updated theirs a lot over the years, with new technologies and things that they want to see, but we haven't really updated our chapter 761. So I'm planning on pulling what we have, kind of pulling up CBU's construction specifications manual for storm sewers and seeing if I can kind of put in any new updates and break that way. And then over time you can we'll get a lot of reading. With that, but this is a good thing to put in there. Okay. In an hour. Everyone okay? Okay. I don't think with you, I need to go into detail on active construction sites. But if you have any questions or concerns, absolutely, let me know. I want to get to the next chapter. So there's all the references of the administrative manual to say if you have to design a temporary sediment trap on a construction site, they'll have the methods to do that. That's really the biggest fine thing.
It was like 2000. What was the date? I mean, would you just say current?
Oh, yeah, good idea.
What-
It was
Yeah, it said-
2007.
Yeah, which they should be updating.
Yeah.
In
Um,
the most current or in the current,
Uh-huh.
or you have or later edition, but maybe you can just,
Latest edition.
yeah, just latest edition.
Yeah, but they've
I don't
also,
think, I don't think you got it when you did that.
Yeah, latest, it should be.
What?
You're gonna keep 2007 in, or you're just gonna write latest edition?
oh. I put this comment in here.
Oh, okay,
So we can, yeah.
okay,
Yeah, the issue is that they're publishing draft BMP guidelines on their website. And it's not actually incorporated into the manual or a new manual.
Mm.
And so, again, it's not enforceable by us, but we need to have some type of reference
yeah.
in that, so. So yeah, that's why I need to clarify how I word that. I think they're wanting us to get away from actually referencing their documents because they're not enforceable by the local MS4.
Mhm.
But we need to have measures in place that are at least as stringent. So. The technical standards manual should have, like supplemental, guidance documents for BMPs that aren't in the state's guidance. Like for a while, they, haven't had them on like wheel washers or dewatering of all things, and some other really big ones. We will have guidance on those in the technical standards manual. Post construction, chapter 5. So.
Oh. Oh, here, I just found something.
Yes.
I think it's just a typo.
Okay.
It should be,
I know
I
that.
think we're missing a Y.
Yep, I know about that one.
Okay. I don't know why I saw ears. And then I'm like,
Yours. Yep, no, I know about that one. There are typos in here. I'll make those before. Okay. Wordy. But, okay, so this is the chapter for post-construction requirements, and anything that requires CSGP coverage should also have a post-construction management plan, so that's the permanent stormwater features on a property. But really, anything that requires detention, should have an operation maintenance manual, and we'll be able to enforce it for long-term maintenance of whatever that permanent stormwater infrastructure is. Reference to the technical standards manual, and everything should be in the basement. So. A little bit redundant, but this adds a water quality component that the stormwater quantity chapter didn't have. So, in my mind, I would love for it to be combined into one, but I also see why they separated out the quantity discussion versus water quality. The technical standards manual has a good section on what they call hotspot land uses, which I actually refer to quite a bit because we see things like, waste transfer stations and areas where you're gonna have outdoor fueling. That anything that could have a source of pollution that isn't just your standard parking lot. I go in and I ask them, I need another water quality treatment before, the discharge, and before you go to the pond. So permanent filter inlets or, forebay or something like that. For those additional pollutants. Good, okay. Chapter 6, karst. So this is the big discussion where received feedback from the commissioners asking for something more stringent than what we currently had. Current ordinance, it's within the planning and zoning ordinance requires a 25-foot buffer along the largest closed contour sinkhole. In general, you were not ground truthing every single sinkhole that comes up on a plat. But in general, closed contour within a karst area, we're going to define that as a sinkhole. And 95% of the time it will be.
And I think you increased it to 50 foot on this then.
So we increased it to 50 feet.
Yeah.
So the planning department was satisfied with, thank you, Ginger, the research you did and the feedback that, we had on this discussion. I'm seeing it as very similar to the city's karst ordinance, where they require any sinkhole within, if the largest closed contours are within 100 feet of each other, they consider that to be a compound sinkhole, and they put all of that into an easement. So those maximum width of those largest closed contours, you're gonna have, if you put a 50-foot buffer on those, that would mirror that guidance. And it'll be a little bit more stringent because they would then put a 25-foot easement around the outside plus a 10-foot buffer setback on it.
For permanent structure.
So 35 feet total for structures. We would have 50 feet total around each sinkhole, not having to define a compound sinkhole, but another question came up in our discussion with the planning department on words that their consultant have put in their new CDO, and they use the term sinkhole cluster. Have you heard of that term before and how it's different from a compound sinkhole?
I don't think I've heard it. I mean,
Okay.
I can see them being very similar. but
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. But not that is it.
yeah. I guess just nuance.
Okay.
The same.
I think there was a karst valley on Isom Road where the
Yeah.
entire valley is a nothing but sinkholes.
It's like 100-acre closed
Yeah.
contour.
And there's a lot of development there too.
Yeah. There are people living within that closed contour. There are several what look like sinking streams in that area.
I mean, you just do the Mitchell Plateau, right? Yeah, just
What are we even doing
the
here?
entire Mitchell Plateau.
So outside of just having a more strenuous ordinance and doubling the conservancy area, what other kind of real examples have precipitated this discussion to thinking that our 25-foot conservancy area isn't adequate? Because when we start looking at this, and now I'm completely for, protecting these and making sure that we don't have any unfortunate things occur, like people's homes falling into the sinkholes. But when you start comparing these and coupling them together with other ordinances,
Mhm.
you potentially are taking away from that buildable area minimum they need as well.
Right.
Which then starts really restricting a lot of these landowners to have anything or have any ability to develop their property. So what else outside of doubling it from 25 to 50 has been discussed, and what other real scenarios out there have you encountered that you could speak to that really make this conversation, what made it here? How did
Yeah.
how did we
Right,
get
right.
to it?
Yeah. Obviously, I've seeing some homes that were built within a closed contour that you could call, oh, I can't close my garage door anymore. I'm really sorry. The county approved that back in the 90s and here we are. I think we owe it to homeowners to provide as much protection as possible. I'm not a geologist, obviously, or an expert, and the 50-foot was not something I came up with scientifically. I was asked to go as far as we could. And I think based on what the city does with their 100-foot separation between sinkholes, it seemed like the maximum I could reasonably do without being more stringent. But yeah, I don't know of a specific situation where someone would have. We have a distinct problem with 25-foot versus 50-foot. I mean, it would change on every sinkhole. Every sinkhole will be different.
Counselor, I just wanted to ask, has research been done to justify or to suggest that there's a significant difference between 25 and 50, or you get a benefit from that?
Yeah, Ginger did some significant research on this.
Thank you.
Yeah, most literature actually suggests 100-foot
Okay,
setbacks, so 50 is being
okay.
quite generous. But a lot of it has to do with the slope leading to the sinkhole.
Mhm.
So you can imagine if you have a very steep slope leading to the sinkhole, that you want a much larger buffer. And 50-foot seems like with our topography, 50-foot seemed like it was realistic of a
And,
distance.
yeah, because in that one article we got, I think they're saying, yeah, the larger the buffer, the more, but less infiltration, less pollutants are going in. And they wanted to get 100-foot, but they said 50-foot was more economic, the most cost effective.
Right.
And so yeah, it's a greater buffer than 25-foot, so therefore less pollutants going in. And then to me, I know there was I talked to another karst expert who done dye tracing and sinkhole inventories for NDOT. And he was mentioned this whole slope thing too, but I'm thinking want an easily implementable, evaluation. And because you could do vegetated bottoms versus rocky bottoms, slope, steep, not steep. And so, I don't know, 50-foot, I think you're getting greater protection for your groundwater resources, but you're not going as far as you could.
Right.
Yeah, I guess my concern, of course, is when this is presented, if this discussion could be on the record, or if in the front, don't we have findings and
Yeah.
stuff like that, if we could reference this research material, because this is something that people would say, well, that's arbitrary. We want to be able to show that some thought actually went into this standard.
Right, sure.
And this is why we came up with 50, which is actually a compromise from what was recommended. So that would be helpful.
I think having the reference was great, and actually, if we could maybe get more, because I assume there's been more research on this whole buffer with that.
I struggled to come up with more, but
Okay.
feel free if you want to. I was asking, there's only one person that I haven't asked that I still am planning on reaching out to, but he's not working in this area anymore. He's working elsewhere. But
Yeah.
He's still in the area.
I see.
So I thought about reaching out to one additional person who may have a little bit more information, but I struggle to find more.
Well, what's Crowley's first name?
Noel or Jason?
Jason.
Yes.
The son, yeah,
So I tried to reach out to him as well to get his,
right.
yeah, I tried to reach out to him as well. So, yes, I would love to, yeah. I can do a little bit more research on this front if you need.
And I'm happy to reach out. I'm not that I know Jason probably very well, but I'm happy to, also reach out.
Okay.
That'd be useful. because you're getting that input from those karst experts.
Well, that's what I was also, because one of the things I had suggested is that if anybody was in those areas that did not believe that they were compromising the groundwater system, right?
Mhm.
Because either it's a sink that doesn't flow to the groundwater system, it maybe is a short circuit to the stream that's right next door, or something that there might be a way for them to kind of fight it, I guess,
Yeah, it
right?
would be an appeals process. for
Appeal
everything,
process, right, and so if there was an appeal process, we would want to make sure those that would do the appeals process,
Right.
if it was a reasonable thing for them to be able to perform that.
And planning and I did discuss what instances would need to be appealed to BZA versus drainage board.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
we will make that clear, who's gonna be appealing what to whom,
To
which
whom.
board.
yeah,
I brought up this example just in discussions about buildable area and the buffer. This is going off of 25 foot. Nice little sinking stream here that discharges to
Mhm.
another ravine,
Mhm.
possible spring right here. This is going off some of the NHD layers where I was kind of like figuring out what's happening here. This is a full closed contour that needs to be a buffer on.
Mhm.
Some of these are greater than 50 foot distance between the largest closed contour, but less than 100 feet. Some of them are just over 100 feet. But when it comes to buildable area, do we really want a house going in the middle of an area like this, right? And there's still gonna be provisions, if people need to put a private access drive through a karst conservancy, we can approve that.
Mhm.
If there's no other way to do it, they can put a private access drive if they need to get to a part of their property or go through an area like this to get to their house, we can do that. But to me, this is like an extreme example of when we're talking about what is actually buildable, what we're trying to protect. Do we wanna consider, like this? This is a very extreme example, I understand.
So in that example, my scale is kind of goofy here. What would be considered 50 foot around, let's say that cluster, the 3 sink
Uh-huh.
area, what would be a 50 foot buffer around that?
Okay, so from this dark line to this line here is 25 feet.
Okay,
So you're basically connecting some of these karst areas more, so it would be more of an entire protected.
Yeah.
Area, rather than having these narrow channels of buildable area between the sinkhole areas.
And my concern is probably more address a appeal or a variance process, but it's
Mhm.
when it eats into that minimum just a bit, and you know that they're not planning on ever going in that conservancy area, but now that that is a conservancy area, it doesn't
Mhm.
account to their minimum buildable, so it's interesting. It'd be nice to, and it's not these extreme
Right.
scenarios, it's more of those very minor ones. Next-
Smaller lots.
Yeah, and next
Doesn't
thing you know,
matter.
they're like just 0.1 acre out of their minimum because of the conservancy area, and they're not planning on, going into that area, but it doesn't account for their minimum, so would that be an appeal process or kind of a BZA process?
Yeah. I think.
And it'd be nice to kind of have those things spelled out too, because again, it's not this example that I'm concerned, it's more the smaller lots where it's just impacting the bigger.
If it's a single lot with a single sinkhole, they could also contract out someone to calculate high water elevation in that sinkhole. We are leaving that provision in there so that it gives them another alternative, which may give them a smaller buffer area around that sinkhole. And yeah, so to me, like, that is the main issue, is going to the smaller lot. Like, this one won't have issues, we need a buildable area, it's 27 acre lot. So things, the larger lots are.
But when you're at the minimum of 2.5 and you need a 1 acre buildable,
Yeah.
and you have.
Right.
Some of these karst features and
Yeah.
go from the 25 to the
I
50.
think we'll have.
But that could impact their minimum, not necessarily the disturbance in the conservancy area, just
Mhm.
the minimum requirement that planning has to
Mhm.
develop on the lot. So
Okay.
that's the concern I have.
We will probably
Yeah.
need to see more fuels if it does come to that.
Was it in that instance that you're concerned about flooding of the home, right? The one you were talking about, where,
Yeah.
I mean, within
Yeah.
that buffer, you could have. It could slope away from.
Yeah.
from-
And so we would use we can use our discretion.
Yeah.
In that appeals process, if the 50-foot buffer, like you said, extends above a ridge for the drainage area to the sinkhole.
Mhm.
There, yeah, depending on each sinkhole, there would be.
But I know this is a big conversation. Dave's right, that I think it will be scrutinized. You know,
Oh,
and so definitely, want to bring this up for further consideration as you're working with this, Kelsey, and maybe talk with planning too, because it'd be very unfortunate if, it has unintended consequences. Where people are even more restrict on their property, even though that they're not gonna go into that conservancy area and disturb it, so.
Right. Yeah, I think not so much with the subdivisions and residential developments, but the commercial developments will be the ones to probably. respond to those.
Well, yeah, they have the money to handle those. My concerns are the ones that.
And they're
don't
gonna
have
have.
yeah.
The
bigger
ability to even go through a BCA process or appeals process, and
Yeah.
they just are stuck right there and,
Yeah,
they're. Most likely gonna be great stewards of their property and, not impact those conservancy areas. If we're following that example, next thing you know. They don't have the minimums to do anything, so that's kind of, again. I don't want to repeat myself, but that's kind of my lens on this one.
Very legitimate. I mean,
Yeah, when I worked in the city, I heard a lot of rumblings from contractors and other folks on why they couldn't disturb a certain area, and the city's so strict on their karst ordinance.
I mean, and I mean, items being a lot more restrictive of buffers along streams and things like that as long, so it's, yeah, it's
Oh.
happening because of that need to protect the resources, so.
And the city and myself have really trying to get item to say that their buffer requirements apply to karst.
Yeah.
Sinkholes.
Oh,
They
yeah.
will not commit to that right now,
I know.
but I also know that if you have, say, water quality violation, they're still gonna consider that sinkhole a direct connection to a water body, so I'm like. Yes, but I think that's the way we need to be thinking, and we can fall back on the state's guidance requiring buffers on water bodies. So we're interpreting it. Okay. Okay. All right, and then. I know we got started a couple minutes late, but it is 10 o'clock. And we can require some full evaluation. Basically hiring a geotechnical report to have a geologist or PE say, yes, this is a sinkhole, these characteristics, recommended ways to say fill it in if it needs to be filled in. We've had those where it opens up, in an area where public safety could be at risk, we need a way to fill it in. Things like that. During construction, call me if you have a sinkhole open up on a construction site, and who's new in there, the other customers here, so they had flooding considerations. We have that 1%, assume probability for 48-hour storm. To calculate that as a high water event. And I feel like there are a lot of options on some of these. To either do more calculations, you can appeal it to the board. Bring any of these, flooding concerns. This is the next new sinkholes. So they'll have to call our office if you discover a new sinkhole. Planning department will have their things that they need to do for that. From my point of view, I want to make sure it's protected, for safety and erosion around that sinkhole. If it needs to be filled in, we'll have that overseen by an engineer. And,
What about in Florida where you get a new sinkhole? It takes the whole house. And somebody,
that
somebody
the-
died in one of those sinkholes.
Or the Corvette Museum.
Yeah, I don't think we have the
Oh,
distance. I don't think our sinks are,
Yeah.
we don't have enough,
Cover over the,
yeah, there's not enough
Yeah.
of that bed to be destroyed for that significant. It's more minor.
probably all
Collapses.
sand too compared to our clay.
Okay.
Well, yeah, it's more minor collapses though in our area, luckily.
Yeah, yeah.
Might lose a tractor, but not a whole.
Not-
No.
Correct.
Okay, so the permitting chapter, this one is a lot and it's kind of confusing. We do have a permit flow chart. I haven't updated it yet to mirror our electronic permitting procedures, but that's on my list to do before it's passed. So again, this is just creating our stormwater permit where we have requirement now where I'm not just tagging along on other department reviews, I'll have my own permit where we can say withhold a permit for adequate. We have it all set up in OpenGov when it has completed that for us. So people can apply just like another permit. And yeah, it's basically the requirement for the CSGP where you have an acre or more of disturbance. It's our local permit to mirror that. And anything that requires detention or anything that requires a review will be issued based on what a permit. The interesting thing about this model ordinance that I learned this year after talking to other county MS4s is that they have very low disturbed acreage area threshold for triggering the stormwater permit. And I realized that was for other counties where they don't have, say, planning department, or building department. And so the stormwater ordinance is able to capture a lot of the residential development that way. We don't need to do that in the Monroe County because we have a very strong planning and building department. And they will also have enforceable erosion control standards as well for those smaller projects. So, to give my insight on that. So if you see other model ordinances where they have a threshold of 10,000 square feet of disturbed area, we don't need to do that here because we already have regulations on it because of a lot of development. So anyway, for the sake of time, I don't want to go through all the permitting procedures for these chapters.
I have one really general comment.
Yes,
Just the use of OpenGov, the term, I would
Yeah.
say like just electronic permitting, so, we're not identifying one particular vendor, so,
Mhm.
kind of like what we did earlier, the current one,
Mhm.
or something
just
more
like the counties.
general, so, have a new permit, that doesn't fall directly into OpenGov
Exactly.
immediately, but we can still kind of have a means to issue that
Mhm.
electronically.
That's great. Yep. I'm not sure that's. Okay. This one is with the application checklists and everything, which we've transferred into the OpenGov application. Again, thank you on that. So, book review and everything will be done electronically. We do hold a pre-construction meeting. Anyway, we required an operation maintenance manual that is recorded with the property. I don't know if this is appropriate for today's discussion, but we've been kind of back and forth on when to require that O&M manual to be recorded. Either before they begin construction, which is a good way to get it done and you get the owner's signature on it. But then we've received feedback from local engineers that the owner doesn't understand what they're signing at that point. If you complete the project, we get as-built of the pond on things that have been adjusted during construction or something. The owner can see what was installed and what they'll have to maintain, then they sign it and then you record it. I think we'll be able to have more control over that with our own stormwater permit. We just tag on to the land use certificate right now or other planning department approval. But that's something we're considering with the O&M manual for timing
yeah.
and makes sense. Okay.
So what are you suggesting
Just altering that step in the permit procedures, I guess. Again, it's hard to.
I mean, I guess,
mm,
would you be fine with getting it after the as-built, and you think that's more ideal, or do you? think-
Yeah. It is, sometimes it's just hard to require it when the project is done,
Right,
and the engineer isn't as involved at that point, except,
do you think there's like a preliminary one, and then one that is updated after the as-built?
Yeah, we will still approve it during the plan review to make sure the content of the O and M manual is sufficient. But it's when to record it with the things.
Right.
I don't want to have to record it twice.
So you have a draft, essentially,
Mhm.
maybe an unsigned draft.
Yeah. Then the pond is built. As built can be added as, exhibit in that O and M manual, and then have all of that recorded with the deeds. How it would be ideally done.
Should the county keep track of all these and have an inspection list that
Yes.
should come up from time to time?
Yes, so that's something that I basically hired Erica to do. So I created her position because we hadn't been doing that very well previously. No MS4s in the state were really doing it very well. Except for Greenwood. But no, and they had a dedicated person for it. But the state general permit now requires us to inspect them regularly, every 5 years for privately owned facilities. So we've made great progress on an inventory of all the ponds in the county. And we're at like 260 ponds right now.
Oh, wow.
The city has over 500 that they've inventoried.
Yeah,
So we have the inventory. It's not complete, but we've gotten through much of the county. And that will then form the basis for a regular inspection program. And we are tracking the O and M manuals. We have really good records, not all of them. And not all of them have been recorded, but we track them as best as we can. And any new ones, we definitely have very strict procedures for how we organize our files and track them. So,
Well, individual homeowners and homeowners associations don't deal with all this,
yeah,
unfortunately.
yeah, I'm not sure how to proceed with ponds that are in poor condition or non-existent or all of that. I would love to provide some funding assistance through the MS4 in the future for that. Because the HOAs, I don't want to blindside them when all of a sudden they need to spend $10,000 of their non-existent budget to fix a pond. It's gonna be a public perception issue and education and yeah.
It's going to be up to the counties to check all these.
Yep, we're required to do it now, so,
To check them, but not maintain them. And so that's.
right,
That's where yeah, so in Hamilton County, we did a huge homeowners education yearly workshop to bring forward the idea that these are their stormwater assets to
Mhm.
maintain, and so
Yeah.
they need to start building that into their dues, and that they need to start
Mhm.
being considerate of how they treat these stormwater ponds so that they
Right.
can address the maintenance issues as they come up and not cause further maintenance issues, so.
Yeah.
We want to do something like that, it might be beneficial to
Mhm.
do, but
Yes,
yeah, having a funding source to assist. At least on the front end as
Mhm.
that knowledge is being handed over to them.
Yeah.
That would go very far.
yes.
What does, in the county, do they do what the city does, where you're paid toward the drainage? I forget what we pay so much a drainage fee. essentially.
Yeah, yep. That funds our MS4 program, and we do provide the SWCD with 30,000 a year for a cost share program. So if we were to expand that into, assist HOAs, say, like to have the ability to handle the money and, do all the 1099. and all that. That'd be- Yeah, and anyway, that's how I'm kind of visualizing it, but, yeah, we do, assess a stormwater fee. 75.77 annually. For flat rate for residential and then with the ERU scale for non-residential properties.
But
And
we
that-
don't
is
do
that cost share
anything in particular with like homes that have any kind of stormwater infrastructure.
We do not have a credit program though.
Have you seen any credit programs out there?
I don't know about in Indiana. I know Christopher Burke has a credit manual for stormwater programs, but implementing it and.
No, yeah, it especially as
it's
we're
really-
still getting a better sense
I
of
think
all the
Sister started
locations.
one, but
Okay.
I'm not. Yeah, I can get you in touch with them, but I feel
Yeah.
like they started one.
It would be interesting to have that discussion. I mean, we're asking
Yeah.
them to do more, you know.
Right,
That cost share program that's with the SWC, is it
Yeah.
specifically for? Like HOA type,
I use it for ag.
these brag,
Yeah. And my goal is to have them leverage it with other grants to help homeowners use that as match for other grants.
interesting,
Yeah. We'll talk about that later if you want.
sure.
Well, my thoughts are. Areas in the county where maybe it hasn't been maintained and it might cost a lot just to get back to that maintaining, you know, component of it. Like, how can we kind of relieve some of the costs
Mhm.
there, because
At least on
no one's just gonna
engineering,
magically find money sitting
No,
around. if they
Dredging
don't
a
have
pond
it.
is expensive.
Yeah,
Right.
so
like some of them need to just be redesigned and.
I don't know if this really
Yeah.
is outlined or needs to be in the ordinance, but
Right.
I think something like that would be neat to hear in discussion.
Mhm.
You know, the preceding year or two.
Yeah, I can have Erica give you a presentation on the ponds we have in our inventory so far and what she's finding and you can have that
Yeah.
discussion.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay,
Yeah, yes.
she's on vacation right now.
But, you know,
Should be
but
glad to hear
issues,
them talk about it.
issues she's running across, you know, is there a commonality of issues or, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
Yep, great, okay. Maintenance agreement. Okay. And then. Big thing we've been running up against is individual lot development. So the state tried to fix the gray areas in their new CSGP. Regardless. If you have a subdivision with 2 or more vacant lots. And the lot sizes are, you know, greater than 2 acres, you assume half an acre of disturbance for each of those lots. That subdivision then would meet the 1 acre threshold and is required to have a SWIP. Then I realized when I started working here that Terry had decided he didn't want to deal with that and wasn't requiring it. And I had email documentation from the section chief at Iden saying that we weren't doing it properly. So I've been trying to properly implement the SWIP requirement on minor subdivisions with the help from planning department and others. Erica is taking on the brunt of it now and has been doing a great job. Basically, we want to make it as easy as possible for residential homeowners. The fact that we have certified plot plans now actually makes this seem like more of a reality, so that's helping. And she has a template now where it should be very easy to make an individual lot SWIP so that she can just approve it and they can get their coverage. But anyway, I would love it if we could just permit that at the local level and not have to meet all the state specific requirements. If we can demonstrate that our program is at least as stringent for individual lot erosion control, we do have a good local program. So basically this, individual lot development, permitting and everything is,
Would that require detention then too?
No,
Because,
no.
okay, because when you get in a SWIP, you.
yeah, but the local MS four can choose to waive it. And so I think because we chose under the waiver section for minor subdivisions, we may waive it for those.
Because that would be really
to do that.
difficult.
Oh, I know,
think-
yeah,
to do, yeah.
yeah. And then some larger MS fours will require detention for minor subdivisions, but maybe in let's say, flatter areas or you have a lot of development in your county, but
Well, that's good to know. I didn't know what you did. locally weighted, okay.
Yeah, yep, and that did come up in our discussions with the state, other. It is kind of frustrating for some MS4s where you want them to be implementing detention for all those sites. And they can choose to waive it themselves or not, it is a little frustrating still. In this instance, I think it makes sense in a rural area for minor subdivision. But anyway, regardless of the size of the subdivision, we'll have certified plot plans for the individual lots. For example, Southern Meadows, where we have floodplain, those basic grades marked on the site plans, and to make sure that their individual lot grading and their floor elevations are compliant with all of that, so we're able to check that.
Yeah.
Obstruction
Obstruction entrances, so summing off the streets, things like that is,
Yes.
that's huge.
Yeah.
What's this self-monitoring program?
That's a state requirement for anything that has, that meets that state threshold for the stormwater permitting. It really comes into play if you have compliance issues. We can request your self-monitoring evaluations. We really look at that for the larger sites.
They're supposed to do a checklist and after every rain event or
Yep.
it's specified in,
Quarter inch.
Yes, sir.
and then they have to keep that record on site.
Ah,
So.
It's
we can
pretty
do-
elaborate.
It is, yeah. So they're inspecting their own sites and we can request to see their maintenance log when we do a stormwater inspection on the construction site. And usually if you see that their maintenance log has nothing in it, we don't believe them and we want to see you fixing things on your site, right? We don't expect it to be perfect by any means, so it's to ensure that they have eyes on their BMPs and they're not forgetting them. Walk around your site, look at your perimeter. Yeah. Good question. Change to plans. The fee structure, so I came up with the general fee structure for charging the fees for the stormwater permit that I will need to alter review at some point. Best I can do is model it off of other counties. But my main thing that I want to see, yes, charging a fee would be great, and we can do inspection fees and whatever. Probably not charge much, if anything, for residential, individual homeowners, individual lots to keep that burden low. But the plan review fees, because I'm contracting out plan reviews, I'll need a mechanism to be able to send the bill to the developer, basically to say, your review took 10 hours. The engineering rate is $100 an hour, so $1,000 would be a fee added to their stormwater permit. They'll have to pay for that review. So, that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean,
Well,
there's no fee currently,
no.
okay.
So what I was paying Terry out of just our professional services line.
Okay,
His
Is
intent
there,
was that I would get this set up sooner.
is there a way that you can work with Christopher to come up with a kind of pre-expected cost per, I don't know, acre or cost per, that way it would be a little bit clearer as to how much they would expect from their review.
It's hard.
I know.
Like one project, we had like 20 something hours of review because we had to do tech modeling on a 22-foot bridge, because they wanted to build a private drive over a stream. Like, you don't have to do that.
Right.
That was the review burden that we just had to go through it, because that's how they wanted to build it and feasible to do. We had to do all the modeling because we had homeowners who we knew were 6 inches below the high water elevation upstream. And on modeling that we had, Terry had contracted out previously just for the county, because we knew that was a problem in the area. So anyway,
So are you just proposing to pass on the bill, whatever it may be, is that? You think
Yeah.
that'll fly? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
Chris
see.
Reverse rate is $110 an hour right now. The most I've seen for review has been, 20, I think it was like 24 hours, but that included a substantial structure, with substantial modeling. Normally, it's gonna be anywhere from 4 to 8 hours for a typical project, for a parking lot and pond. Sometimes less than that.
Well, you have all the drainage calculations there, just going through the drainage calculations.
Yeah, there would be,
You have to, you had to do the heck modeling, the engineer should be doing, that, so it's just a review of.
Yeah.
What you would think.
yeah, sometimes the design, yeah, you can get into all that.
Yeah,
That one, we were trying to decide if we want to do a concrete box versus an arch, and one of them was first a 30-foot arch, and then they modeled it, and they're, well, we can actually get away with a 20-something foot concrete box. And there is a lot of back and forth on what we would allow or not, or having them demonstrate, would be sufficient.
that's
Yeah.
different, I think, something like that.
I don't know if it's a good example, yeah. Yeah. Okay.
I know we're coming up on 2 hours here, and will we continue discussions? Because
Mhm.
on another meeting, that we have a few other things on the agenda there. And I don't know what other people's schedules are.
Yeah. And I'm going to be in here because I was closing out project required as built. I don't think I have much more on the ordinance itself.
Okay.
There's policies, yeah, and the rest is, the enforcement chapter and definitions, but
Oh, okay. I know that.
Just one general
Yes.
comment, and it's with the fee structure is like maybe creating a document where we can track this, where it's fairly easy, just so we can kind of get a baseline of maybe, how much time does an average, review take, obviously it's all gonna pertain to kind of what you deal with on the ground. But I think if we create a way to, track this, it would be helpful. And I know planning is currently looking at a few different ways that they track their fee schedule. So we should probably have something like that in place now, so we can kind of track it over time and then revisit it with actual, numbers and for kind of, data that could help us determine, is $100 good per hour? Does it need to be more? Would it be less? Or should we even entertain it being less? But like, without that, I can't really speak to it except for kind of the information you kind of
right.
are able to provide.
So we could estimate how much money we could be taking in versus like just the plans we've seen the past couple of years. The
Yeah.
size of them, if we're charging per acre.
Well, I don't want you to spend too much time
I
doing
don't-
anything.
But-
now. Well, maybe moving forward, it's easier to track this stuff. if you
Yeah,
have
yeah.
something in place.
Well, maybe Burke
idea.
has a minimum, they could recommend a minimum fee, because planning says, okay, if it's so many acres, that's what your fee is. Or somehow they come up, all of a sudden it's $500 or whatever, it comes off a table. Now, I don't know if they're keeping track of their time, but so it sounds like, John, is that planning, if they're reviewing a project, they're actually tracking how much time it took to review.
Not necessarily, we have an overview, but they have averages. I think they're just kind of very educational, like kind of assumptions of how much time it takes, but I do think it's helpful, so if we ever get to like reviewing the dollars and now having something like this could really be beneficial,
Well, if we're going to third party reviewer, Burke's been doing this for years and years.
Yeah.
They know how many hours it takes to review a typical.
I think a recommendation from them would be easy as far as like more palatable for people versus us just kind of coming up with a dollar amount.
So, yeah, we don't really have a say on their rate though, it's gonna be set on contract.
Well, and having reviewed these in the past, there are the ones that come in that are completely deficient. That take a lot longer to go through and say, okay, this is deficient, this is deficient, you know, and the back and forth compared to the ones that come back and are. Well done to begin with, and it doesn't take that long to review them, so
I think,
passing it on to the land or to the development firm is a good way of doing it, but that expectation, of how much it's gonna cost up
Yeah.
front. That's where I think that it'd be nice to be able to give them some expectation of what,
mhm,
you know, well done plans take only a few hours, you know, be able to give them
yeah.
some upfront knowledge, but yeah.
Right. And I don't wanna put a burden on property owner if they just happen to choose an engineer who doesn't know design standards well.
Sorry.
Maybe One
Yeah.
from out of state or the worst.
Yeah.
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 And,
Well, also there's that in-house, Indiana training, right, that towards those design standards to be a licensed or a trained individual or whatever it's called.
uh-huh,
You know, if you have that list and say that, well, if you choose someone from this list, maybe, you know, it's more likely that they'll be able to go to the standards. I don't know.
is there a list in Indiana? I mean, besides from being licensed in Indiana, it's a PE, like,
Oh, not being licensed PE, but more the trained individuals. I forgot what
Okay.
they're qualified in or qualified. They have some sort of way of verbiage to say whether they've been trained to do this, the SWIPs.
okay,
And so, and I know, both IDOT and IDEM, had been providing training. I don't know if
Yeah.
that's continued. It's been a few years since I've been,
yeah, I know it's
Developed and all that.
shorter, but I didn't.
been a few years. So, I don't know. Yeah, it's just a consideration.
Yeah,
We can
yeah.
table that for another day, right?
And so what? Obviously, so what do you need from us in this?
I think this conversation is really what I need.
Okay,
To
okay.
Just think what it's gonna look like implementing, any concerns you have on wording. Yeah, that's my biggest thing, because a lot of it will come to the drainage board for, you know, approving some of these projects and having to deal with appeals and favors and. So I think for that first one, then you have to start seeing. Appeals for Signal Conservancy or things like that. I just wanna. Yeah, get your input.
Okay, before we get to the rest of the agenda. Did any of you hear that we're gonna have a lunar eclipse on election day? Don't know if it's gonna be complete, total, or partial. That I haven't heard yet. But interesting.
Interesting coincidence, yeah.
Let's go through the rest of the agenda.
Okay,
Well, that was really easy though.
and the approval of, the drainage board meeting dates.
Pretty much the same as it's always been, right?
Yeah, first Wednesday.
And it seems like we've got flexibility if we
Yes,
don't have enough folks. So
When it has gone through the process now of rescheduling the drainage board meeting and having to do the public notice and everything, so.
I'm familiar with that process, very good, very good.
well, I would recommend approval of next month's monthly meeting dates. Next year's, I'm sorry.
Next year, yes, and, can I second?
I'll
Okay.
second.
Oh, Jim, sorry, okay, and all in favor, Jim?
Aye.
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 Aye, okay. Dates are approved. All right,
Thank you all.
and you got the staff report discussion.
Yeah. I'm not sure if we have time for this. I'm fully updated with tracker here, but this is the time where I can bring, you know, the site plan reviews to you.
Okay.
Yeah, a lot of them have been very small areas, small disturbed areas, small amounts of new impervious. Or just under 4,000 square feet. And so it's. A lot of these came in the springtime, so these had Terry's review. Biggest one is this Highland Village Church has still not been approved, still deficient, and we sent them a final notice saying the next submission does not meet our standards. Planning director can choose to deny it, so that's an update for you there. Everything else has been either drainage in a regional pond or just requiring water quality treatment, or not requiring detention. So. I don't think what I've been up against here. Yeah, and then we have a fair amount of minor subdivisions. You saw the one with the sinkholes there. That was interesting. I pulled up. Haven't really had any questions on those minor subdivisions. But I don't know how much time I want to spend on this, going over them at this point.
Yes.
But, I mean,
Okay.
I've got anything specific for planner reviews since you see most of them too.
No, we've been very consistent, and it's nice seeing these plots updated with drainage easements and other conservancy areas, and I think the ordinance gives us enough ability to adjust occasionally whenever there's an existing structure, just to kind of work around that, so we don't build an easement with its structure in there and immediately have compliance issues, so.
Yeah, we had one where we had to resize an easement. Typically, if it's in a rural area, not much else around, you can say either put the entire floodplain, if it's delineated in an easement, or 100-foot or 50-foot drainage easement, but there was one where they had existing barns and everything, the drainage area was less than 20 acres, and so I worked with the surveyor to get it down to 30 to 40 feet, and we all felt it was reasonable for the area.
I do have one comment. You said you wanted us, or you wanted to move this forward, so next month, would you be looking for us to approve the drainage ordinance?
If we were to meet first week in December, would you feel comfortable recommending approval to the commissioners for the ordinance?
I just think a little heads up for the group to
Yes, no, that's
be 100% behind it. It's a
Yes.
lot of material.
it is.
There's a lot of material.
For a Monday, it's tough because I did read it over the weekend.
I know.
Yeah,
Would you have kind of finalized everything by that December 7th?
We're hoping, like I said, the planning department is the main concern I have, and working with them to work through the floodplain and karst issues where they overlap. And the logging ordinance is another thing. Dave, if you have some time, I know we need to sit down and talk more about that, but I don't think the procedures are gonna change much other than us having a stormwater permit, but there's just things with like the drainage area release rates and stuff I want to get implemented. Really. For any, especially for this, developers that come in over the winter into the springtime, so that we can start. applying them more
Implementing
stringent.
right.
Yeah.
So do you have the technical standards?
Yeah.
Ready?
Yeah. I know we'll find things that need to be edited, and that can be done at the drainage board level, like
I'm sorry.
the technical standards manual.
Yeah.
It'll be attached to the ordinance and passed. But we can make revisions
To it fairly easily, right?
fairly easily, and if there are petitions that are kind of in the mix, we can review those individually.
It's the
Mhm.
ordinance itself that needs the fine tooth comb to make
Exactly.
sure we're on board with it, because changing that
Exactly.
is gonna be more difficult.
It requires commission.
Well, I think it's all gonna require commissioners. to get
Yes.
Put in there, but the technical standards are just math and science, and so those don't really involve a lot of policy. I just think if you go to the commissioners and say, hey, here's a standard, here's why, X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
It'll be done.
Right,
But I do think it all is going to come from commissioners.
so even updates to the technical standards manual, I'll present to them, but. Okay, yeah. But this is what the drainage board is recommending to change, and that's just something I can do as staff, like,
Probably
go to work session kind of thing.
You want to say Yep, and we'll bring this to the next drainage board meeting for approval, and if we find that we have more questions or more
Yeah.
changes.
Yes, we can always.
We can always push it up to the summons there.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, and to let you know, we have our contractors workshop Wednesday, November 18th.
That's it. I was wondering.
Yes, and I have Carrie Daly from Fritz Burke Engineering coming to do a special breakout 2-hour session with just engineers to talk about implementing the technical standards manual. So,
great,
sorry, the 16th, I knew I had that wrong, Wednesday the 16th.
Just trying to
Sorry.
find that.
So yeah, the local engineers, like they've been hearing about this for a while. They've all had sent them copies of this last year. And I've been trying to reach out to a few of them individually to say, hey, you know, do you have any questions for Kerry before he prepares his presentation? And,
Mhm.
you know, trying to get them ready for it. So
You're getting it. Peter?
Andy gave me 2 very good questions.
How about, how about the other consultants? That's what I'm
No, not
curious
yet.
about.
Not yet. But no,
Andy's always
Andy asked
good.
me.
He has good questions.
He asked about how we determine the countywide release rates. And CBAS did a stream stats study with 20 representative sites throughout the county to find what our streams could handle. And it's significantly higher than other areas of the state, obviously where it's flatter and
Right.
whatever.
Yeah.
So 0.9 and 0.5 is high for Indiana, but it's the question on how we determine the critical drainage area release rates. He also wanted that elaboration. That was something that Terry had come up with.
Mhm.
He halved that rate because he found that having it was still higher than other areas of the state where you had like 0.1, 0.2 release rates. So, and he did his own study where he found, you know, some sites to develop and figured out, you know, what would it be feasible to do this in Monroe County?
Mhm.
So that's a discussion I can see, you know, I don't have much more to go on other than what Terry had come up with,
Yeah.
the
that
discussion
might
the
be good
drainage
to
board had,
present. Yeah.
but yeah, we can discuss that. So, yeah, that was a big question. So as far as having to back up what we're passing here. I did ask Siavash for his results in the stream stat study, so I do have that now.
Hmm.
It's a $200 email, but it was worth it.
Wow.
Sorry, nothing. Just want to let you know that, yeah, I do have his data now for that. So if we do get questions on it, that's.
All right,
I move to adjourn.
okay, I second.
All in favor?
favor? Thank you, Jim. Take it easy, Jim.
Jim, or Marge incognito.
Thank you.
Yeah, so long, everybody.
All right.